Hello, welcome to this video series on units and unit conversions. This first video is an introduction to units. In math class, we commonly come across problems such as these, which use pure numbers. But it turns out that in the real world, most of the numbers that we encounter use units. So for example, in cooking, we could talk about 1 cup of flour. Cup is the unit that goes with a 1. In carpentry, we can talk about 4 feet 7 inches. In medicine, 81 milligrams for a dose of medicine. Very important to get this unit right, or we could give the patient too much or too little medicine. In economics, we could talk about, say, $4.12 per bushel of wheat. Science, 1.43 grams per milliliter. Here we have 2 units associated with a 1.43. I'll explain about that a little bit later. And electrical engineering, you could talk about 12 volts. Volts is the unit. And even in writing, the word, if we're asked to write a 2,000-word essay, the word word is in fact a unit that tells you, that goes with the number 2,000. So there are many different types of units, and we can group them into categories. So for example, we have units of time, and you're familiar with all of these: second, minute, hour, and so on. Distance, most of these you've encountered. Meter and centimeter are in the metric system. For area, we can have an acre, square foot. Volume, we can have gallon, cup, tablespoon. If you do any cooking, you're very familiar with these units. Also in the metric system, we have liter and milliliter. Mass or weight has units like pound, ounce, ton, gram, kilogram. And even for money, we have units. So for example, the standard unit of currency in the United States is the dollar. In Japan, it's the yen. In the United Kingdom, it's the British pound. And in much of the rest of Europe, it's the euro. So I spoke a little bit about metric units. It turns out that there are 2 basic types of units used in the world. One is the metric system, and the other is what I'm going to call US units, because the United States is about the only country left that's using this set of units. In the United States, we still use the units that we inherited from the British in the 1700s. Even Britain has gone metric in about 1965. So let's look at some of the differences here. For a unit of distance, in the United States, we might use a foot. In the metric system, we use a meter. It turns out a meter is a little bit more than 3 feet. Similarly, the acre, there's about 2.5 acres correspond to the hectare in the metric system. And similarly, there are relationships between the volume units, mass units, and unit of force. The Newton in the metric system, here we go. The Newton in the metric system is the unit of force. So when we're using units, writing out the full names takes time and takes a lot of space on the page. And so unit abbreviations can solve this problem. So for example, the unit kilogram can be abbreviated to kg. Much easier to write kg than kilogram. And kilo is a prefix that means times 1,000. So we're going to do an exercise with this. I'd like you to get out a couple sheets of paper, and we're going to make a list of a bunch of the common unit abbreviations. And this is, you're creating a resource that you can use not only in this video series, but in other science and even engineering courses that you take in the future. You can have this as a resource for the indefinite future. So I want you to put your name and date at the upper left-hand corner and the title Common Unit Abbreviations. Then I want you to pause this video and write time for the category. Then these are the full names of the units: second, minute, hour, and so on. And these are the abbreviations. So for example, for second, it's either the letter S or SEC, and so on. So pause this video now and put your name and date and the title and write all this out, and then resume the video. Presumably you've resumed the video now, and we're going to continue with with this exercise, we have a bunch of other units we need to put in there. So for example, make a little space after year and then write the title distance. And I'd like you to copy all these unit names and the abbreviations. And I will make one little note here. The unit foot or feet is sometimes abbreviated FT, but in carpentry it's sometimes abbreviated by what looks like an apostrophe. Similarly, the inch is often abbreviated IN, but in carpentry it's sometimes abbreviated by what looks like a quotation mark. And so a carpenter might write 4 foot 7 inches as 4 foot 7 inches, like that. Also note that the mile is abbreviated MI instead of M, and I think the reason for that is that meter is so commonly used as M is so commonly used as an abbreviation for meter. So pause this video and write all that down and then resume. Okay, you've resumed at this point, so I'm going to slide this up, and I'd like you to record all the abbreviations for these units of area. And I'll make one note, and that's the square feet can be abbreviated as either SQFT or FT squared. I prefer this because in the world of engineering and science, you're doing what's called unit cancellation, and this is much clearer what's going on. But pause this video and write all those down, and then resume the video. Okay, you've presumably resumed the video. We're not quite done yet. We've got to record units of volume. So we've got gallon, quart, tablespoon, and so on. And here are the abbreviations there. So in a second, you're going to pause the video and write all these down. Notice that tablespoon has the abbreviation of a capital T, and teaspoon has an abbreviation of a lowercase t. And that's because a tablespoon is bigger than a teaspoon, and so that's a way to kind of remember that. I believe there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So pause this video and write down all of these abbreviations, or the names of the abbreviations. Pause it now. Okay, presumably you resume now. And I'll make one other observation here, and that is the abbreviation for milliliter, ML. Sometimes the L is used as uppercase, same here for liter. Sometimes the L is uppercase, sometimes it's lowercase. Well, it's potentially confusing when it's lowercase, because that looks an awful lot like a 1, like the number 1. Okay, next we're going to record the abbreviations for units of mass. And so the first one is pound, which is abbreviated LB. LB? How can that possibly be? Because there's no L in pound and there's no B in pound. How did they come up with that? Well, there's an interesting story behind that. In Roman times, the pound was called the Pondo Libra, which the Libra meant scale or balance, I believe. So it's a pound in the balance, and this was abbreviated LB. This makes sense because there's an L and there's a B. But then people got tired of saying Pondo Libra, and so they started just saying Pondo, and Pondo became pound, and we're still left with the abbreviation LB. You got to be careful writing this, because if you're sloppy in writing it, it looks an awful lot like the number 16. Ounce can be abbreviated OZ, and go ahead and pause the video or write down the rest of these, and then you're done for the moment. Then resume the video. Okay, you've resumed the video. Later in your academic career, you might add units for, say, electricity or some other things, but this is a very good start, what you have already here. So unit abbreviations are used in packaging for food. And so, for example, here's a can of black beans, and we see the term net weight, and NETWT. WT stands for weight, and it shows 15 OZ, so that's ounces. That's a weight measure in the U.S. system. And in parentheses, 425 G, that's the measure of weight in the metric system. So both of them are represented on this can of black beans. And I think there must be a law in the United States about this, because we see this often. For example, here's a package of cereal, and we see that net weight 12 OZ, so that's the US units, and 340 G for grams, that's the metric units. And finally, if we're measuring liquids, we usually, instead of using mass, we use, or weight, we use liquid volume units. So for example, here's a thing of milk, and it says 98 or 96 fluid ounces or 2.8 liters. So in parentheses, we have the metric volume. So to practice using units, I'd like you to get out a fresh sheet of paper, write your name, date, and title on it. And for the title, I would like you to write example number 1-2. That's going to be your homework, or part of your homework. And so what you're going to do is you're going to use the list of abbreviations that you just created to rewrite the following numbers in units using the appropriate abbreviations. So you don't have to write 35 cups on the paper, but you would look up cups and say, oh, well, that's abbreviated by C. So instead of writing 35 cups, you'd write 35C. So there, I've done the first one for you. Write 35C and then write 70 and whatever the abbreviation is for miles, 62, the abbreviation for seconds, and so on. When you're done that, so pause the video. When you're done, resume the video. So another thing to point out is that sometimes a number has only one unit, like 25 cups or 3 feet, but sometimes a number has more than one unit. For example, 50 miles per hour. Both miles and hour are associated with the 50. The word per is very special. It means that this is going to be represented as a ratio, and always the rule is that the units that come before the per are in the numerator, and the units that come after the per are in the denominator. So here's what that looks like. 50 miles per hour can be rewritten as miles goes into the numerator, per hour goes into the denominator, and I can add the abbreviations by saying 50 MIHR, like that, with this line for the ratio, or I talk about dividing with that line. 2,500 meters per second. Meters are before the per, so that goes in the numerator. Second is after the per, goes in the denominator. And this can be rewritten as 2,500 M over S, which can also be written as 2,500 M/S. That's also possible. Okay, so let's look at 2 more examples of this. And the first one, we've got 5.5 seconds. Well, I went right to the S abbreviation per gallon. There's a gal abbreviation. It goes into the denominator because it's after the per. And here's 0.62 grams per milliliter. Grams is abbreviated to G. Milliliter has to go into the denominator because it's after the per. So get out one more sheet of paper and write your name, date, and the title of exercise number 1-3. And I want you to rewrite the following numbers in units as fractions or ratios like I did in the preceding slides. Use abbreviations. So 65 miles per hour becomes some kind of ratio. Just the prior 2 slides show you how to do that. So please do that for another part of your homework. Pause the video now and then resume it when you're done. Okay, you've resumed the video, and I just want to thank you for listening to this video. And the next video will discuss how units work with mathematical operations. Have a good day.